Hey, what's up guys? How's it going? My name's Walter. In today's video, I wanted to give you guys an overview of the JLT Series 2 cold air intake. I've been driving with this intake on for like 3 weeks. So throughout these 2 to 3 weeks that I've been driving with this car, I've been taking down notes just so I can go over it with you guys. I've been doing a lot of comparing between the stock cold air intake and this intake to see the differences, if there was any. And I was actually kind of surprised just from an intake. Now, just some backstory, this car has no tune, it's stock, just like I said, just a cold air intake upgrade. It does, currently at the moment, it does not have the Hellcat headlight air duct. And what that is that's where the air goes through the headlight to the air intake to give better cooling. So currently I have the cap on just because I wanted to give it a fair comparison between the stock one, because when I had the stock one, it was closed as well. Right when I slapped it on, the first thing I noticed was you hear the engine taking in more air. Like you can actually hear the sucking, which is actually pretty cool. You hear it around after 2500 RPMs. Even with the windows closed and everything, you can still hear it from the inside of the cabin, which is pretty cool. Another thing that I did notice is slight improvement in acceleration. It's very minor, but you do feel a difference. And I'm assuming it has to do with the intake sucking noise, but the engine does have a different tone when you're accelerating. But overall, for the most part, the car drives relatively the same. I didn't notice any change in gas mileage or any major differences in drivability, just those things that I mentioned. Now, one thing that I did notice from all the tests that I've done that I'm about to go over, the car overall does read higher in temperatures than the stock cold air intake. Now, one thing that I will say is that this intake, even though it does read higher, it does actually do a better job cooling down faster than the stock cold air intake. For example, if you're at a red light and you start to notice the temperature spike up, once you get going, the time it takes for the intake to go back to the normal temperature you would get like driving around town, it does it faster with this intake versus the stock one. So for this test, I wanted to see how fast it would climb up in temperature at a red light. It jumped up to 120 degrees. Now that's the highest I've gotten. It was a pretty long red light. It was at a major intersection and it sat at 120. And the second I started driving, within like 7 seconds, it immediately started dropping down back to like 96. And on that particular day, it was a little bit hot, so the temperature was kind of running between 96 to 98 consistently. Now on my stock intake, I got the same temperatures pretty much driving around town, but it wouldn't spike up that high at a red light. Now for the next thing I wanted to see was how it did at a drive-through. Just because most of us, these are our daily drivers, so I wanted to put it through like some real world conditions, and I was on my lunch break. I went to a McDonald's and it was a pretty fat line. Like the line was around the building, and I want to say in total it was like maybe 15 to 20 minute wait. Now, the whole time I was in line, the top temperature I reached was 152 degrees. And it got to that temperature pretty fast, and then it kind of just stayed consistent at around that temp. But the second I got my food and I just peeled out, it immediately jumped back down to like 96, which was pretty impressive. I literally drove like 2 blocks and it just completely cooled down faster. And like I said, that's without the headlight being open and having that Hellcat air duct. I am planning on installing that later on, so I am expecting for it to even cool down even better with all that air coming in through the headlight. But since we're talking about future mods to this car, if you guys want to see more Scatpack content like this, please go ahead and subscribe, and I'll greatly appreciate it. I got a lot of mods coming, and I got a lot of plans for this car overall that I want to do. So if you want to stay up to date on that, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And on that same day, when I was driving around town through like some moderate traffic, the car was staying at 96 to 98. And I got on the freeway in Mexico, of course, and I did up to like 120 mile per hour pull from 60. And as I was doing the pull, I was keeping my eye on the temp gauge, and it dropped all the way down to like 88 degrees. Now during a road trip, I left early in the morning, and around that time it was 50 degrees, and I did another pull, 72 to 125 mile per hour pull, and the whole time it just stayed at 50 degrees. Now on that same road trip, I was driving 80 to 90 consistently on cruise control, and it just spiked up 8 degrees. It was sitting at like 58 degrees the whole time. And throughout the rest of the road trip, later in the day when I got a little bit hotter, it was pretty much just matching whatever the temperature was outside. So later on it got to like 60, like 62, 63 or something like that, and it was the same temp as the outside temperature. I didn't realize how fast it got dark, but I kind of wanted to be pretty specific in this video, just in case any of you guys had any questions of how it drives, like some real world driving and stuff like that, in case you guys are considering getting an intake. Now I know there's a lot of debate between stock versus aftermarket. Now I will say this, if you do plan on doing some other mods besides a cold air intake to gain a little bit more performance, I say do it. If you take note, on the red eye they went with a big open cold air intake. Now if you just kind of want something and you're gonna stay relatively stock, I would just suggest staying with the stock cold air intake or just getting a Hellcat intake. I've heard those do a really good job of keeping the engine cool. And I know a lot of people kind of don't want to do intakes just because they're scared of the engine heat getting into the cold air intake and just kind of recycling that engine bay air back into the engine. I will say, if you're gonna do an intake, at least bare minimum get one of these little heat housing shields just to help separate the heat from the engine into getting your cold air intake. But I mean, if you know, higher horsepower Mopar cars have open cold air intakes, your 392 should be fine. And I just kind of wanted to address that, just because I do see a lot of people debating whether it's worth it or if it's not worth it a lot in forums. And I almost forgot, I've been driving around with this intake, like I said, for like some time now, and I've been doing spirited driving. I've been using the paddle shifters, automatic of course, and I've had no issues. No check engine lights came on. And I know it's dark, but thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you liked the video, and I'll see you in the next one.